Well, hey there, folks. Welcome to the Roundup. We are a Cowboy State Daily podcast, and we focus on interesting people in the Cowboy State. And I am so tickled to be able to have a conversation today with this gentleman who not only grew up just outside the Cowboy State, but he is living his dream career in Yellowstone National Park. And we're just going to have a great time today. First, I want to let you know that we have other wonderful podcasts that are homegrown right here in Wyoming. And one of them is very, very important for people who are business people. It's the Wyoming Business Alliance Business from the Basement podcast. Highly recommend checking out their podcast. If you are a business person, if you are thinking about becoming a business person in the Cowboy State, check out the Wyoming Business Alliance and their Business from the Basement podcast for great resources and great conversations. But first, don't go there yet, because first we have to talk with Mike Keller. Mike is a general manager for Zantara, which is the concessionaire for the restaurants, the lodges, things like that in Yellowstone National Park. If you've gone to Yellowstone and you've stopped at a store, if you've had lunch, if you have stayed overnight, you have worked with Xanterra, and they're wonderful people. And Mike has been there. Well, I'm going to let Mike tell you the story, because he's got a great story about his association with Yellowstone and with Xanterra. Mike Keller, it's a beautiful day in Yellowstone National Park, isn't it?
It is, Wendy. Thank you very much. It is such a privilege to be here and speaking with you today. Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh my gosh, no, this is great. I was telling Mike before we got started that he has been high on my list of people to get for this podcast. And so I honestly didn't think I'd be able to get him in this summer season when things are so busy. But here he is, able to carve out just a little bit of time for us to tell us about his amazing work at Yellowstone and the people he works with and the people he gets to meet and the wildlife right outside his door. Mike, you've got the best office in the world if you're outside of the four walls anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even when I'm stuck indoors, I'm still in a great, awesome place to be, for certain. Exactly. So yeah, for sure. So
Mike, tell us about, we'll start out with the present. Tell us about your job right now. You're general manager, and especially over the lodges, right? Tell us about what your job is there at Yellowstone for Xanterra.
Thank you. It literally is everything, just, when we have, over 4.5 million visitors a year coming into Yellowstone National Park, and we're assigned over 850 buildings in this park to operate on behalf of the National Park Service. So we're responsible for making sure we have the lodging taken care of, most of the dining outlets in the park, retail outlets. We have a marine operation on Yellowstone Lake. We have the horse operation at Roosevelt. We do all kinds of summer and winter transportation for visitors, whether it's bus tours or snow coach charters in the wintertime, or the snow coach tour from Mammoth to Old Faithful and back. It's a large operation here. We have about 2,300 guest rooms. We do over 2 million meals a year in the park in the summertime here, kind of situation. We have about 3,500 people we hire to fill our seasonal operation here in the summertime as well. Yeah. So it's a significant operation here to run Yellowstone.
I want to make sure that people know that there's a difference between what Xanterra does and between we've heard all about the, staffing problems with the National Park Service and all that, but that's different. Xanterra is a private organization. They're a private company. So,
correct, yeah.
So that's going to be a different issue. So people are concerned, they're low on staffing, not with Xanterra.
That is right. We're a concessionaire that works in the park on behalf of the National Park Service. We are not a government agency. We're a private entity. So our recruiting, our hiring, everything that we do to operate our operations has not been affected by what's been going on in a broader national conversation. So
how do you have people that return every year because this is just their dream job? Would they may go off someplace else in the world, in the United States, and have a winter job, but they come every year to do summer.
We have multiple different kinds of employees that work for us. Some of us are year-round, full-time, like myself. In fact, Steve Fuller, who was our maintenance manager at Canyon, was there for 52 years. He just retired. So that was his, he came to Yellowstone for a summer, became his career. I have a lot of people who work for us that came to Yellowstone for a summer and this became their career. But we have a lot of people who work for us in the summertime and either go to another national park in the wintertime, or they just become snowbirds and they travel in the wintertime. We definitely fill those kind of niches. We have another program which we call Helping Hands, where we have people come in and work for us in the shoulder seasons, the spring or the fall, where they work for us for about 5 or 6 weeks, just helping us out in those times of need when we're kind of at a little bit of a lower staffing. Then they get to recreate in the park for that period of time, and then go off and do what, like you say, what they're doing, touring nationally, whatever they like to do with their lifestyle beyond that point. So.
What I mean, just a jigsaw puzzle of
Right.
getting staffing and stuff like that. That's a big job. Mike, you've had experience doing this for many years. I just think it is fascinating that you are a hometown guy. I mean, you grew up just right outside Yellowstone. Tell us about growing up in the shadow of Yellowstone National Park and what that meant to you.
Absolutely. Even before then, from my first memories, when our families went on vacations, we always went to national parks. When I was born in Southern California, we lived in there. We frequently went to Yosemite, Kings Canyon, Sequoia National Park. So I have all these memories of just going to national parks. We eventually moved to Denver, and we vacationed a lot in Rocky Mountain National Park and here in Yellowstone. And then when my father retired, we moved to Livingston, Montana. So I moved to Livingston, and started working in Yellowstone when I was 14 years old in 1984. So my first 4 years, I was with the National Park Service. Actually, I was doing geothermal research, assisting the park geologists at Norris Geyser Basin. And then as soon as I turned 18, I decided to come work for the concessionaire, who at that time was TW Services, who is Xanterra today. We just changed names over the years, kind of a deal. But began working in the winter of 1987-88 as a room attendant at Old Faithful Snow Lodge, cleaning rooms.
Wow, you really did then go from the ground up in this
Right.
in this organization. That is so great. I love the fact that you found your way, your family found your way to Montana, and that this is the geology though. That was something that interested you when you were a teenager.
Right.
Is that what still gets you when about being in Yellowstone?
Absolutely, absolutely. You're living in an active, breathing volcano. On top of, actually not in, but it's just great because you see geology here that just is not common in the world. There are volcanoes around the world. There's geysers in very few places around the world, and just everything that goes on in this park. And it's not just the geology, the biology of this park. It's a massive ecosystem here. As I frequently tell our employees, when you go for a hike in Yellowstone, you're in the backcountry. You're not on top of the food chain anymore. You need to be prepared. You need to recognize we are privileged to live in a place that is, wild still. It is natural still. That is something that is just touches me every time I'm around this park, because that's part of what draws me here. It's like this is what the world was like once upon a time, before evolution and everything else happened. Where humans have kind of taken over the world space. This is still like it was once upon a time. So.
Absolutely. And so to be inside that every day has just got to be, I just can't imagine that would ever get old.
Right. Oh, it doesn't. Absolutely doesn't. You talk about living nearby. I've in essence been a Wyoming resident for 40 years because I've lived in Yellowstone Park itself. So best state in the union.
Yes. Yes. I love that. Very good. We're proud. We're proud to have you. We're proud to have you. Mike, your job is so unique because you kind of outlined all the different things that Xanterra does. What part of your life and your career and your work prepared you for this? Because, like, say you worked for Xanterra, you worked for the National Park Service, you went away for a while, you've worked in other parks, but did you always know that you wanted to work inside the park or the national parks and be associated with that?
Yes, yeah, that is. It's hard to describe. It's just a sense of place. This is home, and I've loved being here. I've loved being in national parks. Again, as mentioned before, it's a privilege to be in them and to work in them and to be responsible for the upkeep and preservation of them. And it's something that is very near and dear to me. And it's something that we try to do as a company as well in terms of, teaching our staffs and training our staffs about sustainability and, leave no trace, and want to make sure that, this park remains as viable 200 years from now as it is today for us, for the people who came here 100 years ago, kind of a deal. So that just that sense of, we have a responsibility here to do the right thing and to preserve this park, short-term and long-term, is special. And it's something that has just resonated with me my whole life. And to be able to be in a position to do that is great. Working in national parks, when you first begin, it's a seasonal operation typically. So you're coming in usually in April, May, or June. You work for a period of 5 to 15 weeks. You get to the fall season. A lot of our employees then go off to college. That's what I did for a while, kind of a deal. But you meet people from around the world, whether it's your coworkers or it's the visitors who are coming into the park. And it's an experience you just don't get if you stay in your small town, if you just stay in one place your whole life. You're not given that exposure to the diversity of what the world has to offer for you. And everybody comes here to see this place because it's so special. And it definitely allows you an opportunity, like I say, to meet connections and just meet people and experiences and share stories and just kind of be in that space that you don't necessarily get if you just stay in one place and don't get out there and kind of, see the world, let the world come see you.
It sounds like a place that I should, I would love to go work. Not just yet, but someday I could go there and be one of those work campers and we could go do that. That sounds like a great time because for all those reasons. But your experiences before you got there to Yellowstone, before you got to this job, really helped you to hone all the skills that you were going to need to take over as the general manager for Xanterra in Yellowstone. Where were some of the places that your career took you, Mike, that then prepared you for this?
Right. So I did came here, worked in the park, like I mentioned, was going to college, as a young idealistic, 18-year-old, 19-year-old, I wanted to be the next geologist of Yellowstone. That was going to be my career path and go in that direction. And, when you want to do something and you begin to apply yourself towards it, I kind of realized it may not be the career path I wanted to follow, but I loved hospitality. I loved meeting people like I talked about and be able to provide memorable experiences for guests and visitors and my coworkers, et cetera. So that kind of was the draw that got me into hospitality. And as I started working more and I was getting promoted, it's like, you need to start getting some real just on hands experience. So I left Yellowstone for a couple of years and worked in Seattle, which was fantastic. It was a great experience. Got to really deal with high volume, major hotels in a large urban center and loved it. Took my girlfriend there at the time we got married, who's still my wife today. We had a wonderful time with that. But we woke up one morning, we're just like, we miss Yellowstone. We want to go back, again, that sense of place, that calling. And so we came back to Yellowstone, continued to work in management for several years. And then when I decided I wanted to become the general manager of this park someday, we had the conversation around, you probably need to go get some GM experience elsewhere. So left again in 2016 for a couple of years, ran Crater Lake, went from Crater Lake to Grand Canyon, ran Grand Canyon for a year. And then in 2017, this opportunity presented itself and I came back. So
Crater Lake and Grand Canyon. Wow, those are major places.
Yes, absolutely. Crater Lake is the only national park in Oregon, and it is a gem for that state, and it is a beloved park in that region and by the locals. And again, so I'm walking to another national park, another volcano, and working with just building relationships and working with that local team and understanding how the visitors feel about that park. Crater Lake would get about 800,000 to 1 million visitors a year, so it's not quite as busy as Yellowstone, but it's still very popular. And like I say, it's very special in that region. So learned a lot of things there, met a lot of great people in that space. Went to Grand Canyon, which actually has more visitation than Yellowstone typically on an annual basis. You're right on the I-40 corridor. You have Los Angeles just a few hours away. You have Phoenix just a couple hours away, a lot more urban proximity than you have here in Yellowstone, and again, so just high volume, working with a lot of people, different experiences in that park. But again, just great partnerships and people. And again, it's a beautiful, awesome place. And you're on top of living on the rim and being right above, this massive, it is mind blowing for people who've never been there before. You look at it, it almost feels like a painting when you're looking at it. It just doesn't seem real. It's so vast and so big. But again, taking that experience, applying what I could there, learning a bunch of stuff, and then bringing it back here to Yellowstone.
Now, tell me about the major differences at Yellowstone. What makes being the manager, the general manager there, and the hospitality at Yellowstone, what's different? What's unique about Yellowstone compared to these other places that you've worked? What specific skill sets do people need to have in order to work there and succeed and thrive instead of just being overwhelmed by the sheer volume of visitation every year?
Right. No 2 days are alike. And so you need to be quick thinking, flexible, fast on your feet, kind of understanding what happens. We get about 3.5 to 4 million of those visitors I mentioned before in about a 150-day window. So we kind of go from winter ends, we're kind of spending a little bit of time, the Park Service is plowing the roads and getting us ready to open our operations. And then suddenly it's game on. That last weekend of April, the road's open to the public, and there's already demand at that time of year. And then over the next 7 weeks, pretty much every single weekend, we're opening another location or two in the park. In fact, Roosevelt Lodge opens today, which is our next to last location. Roosevelt's a very popular location in the northeast corner of the park. But by next weekend, we'll have everything open, and we're on that full scale operation like I talked about. So a lot of planning, a lot of organization to prep everything to get ready for those opening dates. Then from that first weekend, second weekend of June until Labor Day, we're just in that day-to-day act and react kind of mode. Visitors are coming. We know the volumes we have to do to feed people, to have rooms ready for people, have campgrounds ready for people. So just get into that daily routine of getting everything cleaned and maintaining standards and making sure that everything is, just representing Yellowstone and Wyoming as well as we can. And then as you get into the fall, it's the process of starting to shut things down. So Labor Day, we close Roosevelt. And then that last weekend of September, first weekend of October, every weekend, we're shutting one or two locations down. And that in itself is another challenge here in the park, because most hotels, you don't open for a period of time and close for a period of time. These are old historic buildings. A lot of them were built, in the late 1800s, early 1900s. They're on National Historic Registers. They are crown jewels in the National Park Service. And to shut a building down completely, blow all the pipes out, take everything out of the hotel, shut it down, and kind of do that stuff, it's a task. We do it well because it's muscle memory. We've been doing it for a number of years and have the experience doing it. But it's still, there's a lot of work and effort that goes into it. So that by the time you get to about Thanksgiving, we've kind of got everything kind of put to bed, as it were, shut it down, let the snow start flying, get ready for the winter season. And then, first about the 15th of December, we open Mammoth and Snow Lodge. You get into that winter routine that goes until the first weekend of March. So, but for managers to work here in the park, it's fast paced. You need to do a lot of job of planning, but you also got to be ready to change that plan like that, given whatever may happen in the park. If we have a forest fire, if there's a major traffic incident, if there's whatever, we don't want forest fires, but any of those things that can happen here that will cause, disruptions. And we had the flood a couple of years ago, which is an example of.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that for sure. Yes. How did that throw a wrench into everything? And not just from a logistic sense for you folks there, but also from a perception for the rest of the world. I know I was covering all of that as it was happening and trying to get the word out. Yellowstone is not closed, people. It's okay. You can come. But like Mammoth had to close down because the sewer system was compromised. And that took a long time. Tell us about that. Was a huge job to get that back up and going.
Right. And to even just before I even begin to that, I cannot express enough how thankful I am to the leadership that was demonstrated by the National Park Service, by Cam Shawley, our superintendent, by the state of Wyoming and Governor Gordon, and everything he did to help support our state, from our congressional and Senate representation. It was just impressive and just humbling to see how fast people worked together to bring Yellowstone back to life after the events of that flood and just to watch it happen. So kudos to all those folks for what they did. But yeah, we're kind of in the moment. The flood's happening. The road washes out between Mammoth and Gardner. The sewer system washes out with it between Mammoth and Gardner. We have about 1,200 people in Mammoth, between the visitors, between the National Park Service staff, between our staff, et cetera. And, and like I said, thinking fast, the National Park Service really quickly realizing, we can't have people living here. We can't have people staying here. How are we going to relocate guests? In the meantime, we have rising waters all around Yellowstone. A lot of the videos and stuff that you were seeing, a lot of the damage took place out in Lamar Valley or in the road between Mammoth and Gardner. A lot of the interior, while waters came up and rivers were high, there wasn't the same kind of damage like you were seeing, and especially into Montana took a lot more of the brunt of it than here in the park. Paradise Valley, Red Lodge, those areas got hit very hard. And a lot of the images you were seeing in the media were those areas being affected by the flooding. But of course, people translate that to Yellowstone's flooding, thinking that's in the park. And a unique thing about Yellowstone, at least in the Mammoth area, is we're not near the rivers, the water. That's like downhill and below from us. So like the Mammoth property itself was never in threat of like being flooded out like you were seeing in some of these images, but the road was gone. And how do you now have this major road that connects, Mammoth to Montana in essence, and it's gone? Not just slightly washed out, like completely washed out and 30 feet into the hillside beyond where the road was. Yeah. This was something, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but I remember Cam coming back from an early flyover, and it's like that road's not reopening because it was completely taken out. And the later images showed that to be the case, So we had this old stagecoach road that was, built in about 1894 between Mammoth and Gardner that still existed. It was kind of a one-way road that you would take down. A lot of people like to bike it or hike it. It was just kind of a little off the beaten path kind of a thing to do. And literally in 5 months, we took that narrow 2-lane thing and built a modern 2-lane highway, paved it, and completed it right before the temperatures got cold and the snow began to fly the 1st of November. It was just awesome to watch that come together.
Miracles happen.
Yes,
Miracles
exactly.
happen. Yeah.
Yeah. And just again, when the combined efforts and forces of all these people in executive leadership positions for our country decided to say, we're going to get this done. It happened. It was just a great thing to see. So.
Wow. So those are just some of the things that you have to deal with, and the just thinking on your feet and troubleshooting and stuff like that. I want to go back to something you said though about the historic buildings, and when you were talking about getting them ready for winter and things like that. Now, we were talking about this as a staff I think it was yesterday. And is the Old Faithful Inn, is that like the largest historic and oldest historic log cabin like in existence? Because it's just such an iconic building.
It is. There are some very large lodges up in Alaska that are definitely impressive, but it is my favorite building in the entire National Park Service system of all the hotels, of all the lodges. For me, it's just the place, kind of a deal. It's massive. It's definitely bigger than almost anything you're going to find in a national park in the lower 48 for sure. There's some large, older historic hotels on the East Coast that are equal in size, or maybe a little bit bigger, but they're not built in this remote mountainous region like Old Faithful Inn is. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah.
That it's just such an iconic place with the flags flying up above. And when you drive, I think that's when people picture Yellowstone National Park and they're coming in from any of the entrances. They're like, but how can we be in Yellowstone? There's no Old Faithful yet. You got to go clear into the interior of the park to get to that iconic image there. But like you say, there's so much involved in that. Do you have to have a minor degree in, architecture and history in order to really appreciate and know what you're doing when you're maintaining these properties?
We have a well-tenured, long-term experienced engineering team that just specializes in this space. We have our own dedicated historic preservation crew that is trained to do not just general repairs, but repairs to historic buildings. So it's when we do a repair to Old Faithful Inn, we're keeping it in the period, in the time frame, in the feel of when it was originally constructed. It's that fine line where people want to have modern touches and modern amenities, but they still want to have the historic feel, and you can't really kind of do both here, in a remote location like we have here in Yellowstone. Like Old Faithful Inn, they still doesn't have Wi-Fi in the property. You have to go to Old Faithful's Knowledge across the street for it, but it's part of the historic charm of that building. And the National Park Service believes it is best to keep it in that space. So we're going to support that decision, and we're going to, keep our operation as it is. So
that is, again, it is part of the charm, and it's something that people coming in should's a bad word, but expect, because when you come to Yellowstone, you're not going to Disneyland. You're not going to Universal Studios here. You are coming to be remote. That's part of the charm of Yellowstone. But that also has to be kind of a irritation for those of you who are trying to work in the modern age.
Right.
And you probably have to have some concessions for that.
Right, we do. Cell service is allowed within the developed area. So at every of the locations you have cell service, but as soon as you leave and get within a couple of miles of there, your cell phones no longer work. Kind of a deal. And that's just and there's lots of portions of Wyoming you can say where you go to portions of the state and it's like I suddenly have no cell service because I'm in a remote area. But if people are coming for that experience, that's what they want. And there's been a lot of feedback over the years from visitors who don't want to have cell service blasted everywhere. You know what I'm saying? Where I can never get away from, technology or whatever else. So, yeah.
Yes. Now,
do your research before you come.
That's right. That's right. Now we're talking about technology. Let's talk about teenagers. Let's talk about your children. You've got 2 girls.
Right.
How you've raised your girls at Yellowstone. Right. Tell us about raising a family in Yellowstone National Park.
Gardner, which is 5 miles from where I am in Mammoth, they have a school down there. So our kids would go to school in Gardner, and that school is a kindergarten to 12th grade. So it's one school, kind of has it all within that space. The classes are small, 8 to 15 kids in a class. everybody knows everybody here because all the parents know everybody in this community, so there's just this constant connection where everything goes on. And the school is really kind of the anchor that really brings the whole community together because it's the commonality with everything. But, my kids grew up and they learned at a very young age, before you just run outside into the yard, you look left and right for elk, you look left and right for bison, for a bear, whatever else. We take them into the city, they'll run into a street without thinking twice because there's no worry about wildlife. But it was a very different priority of what are you growing up around and experiencing what could be around you with that kind of stuff. So that was always interesting. And you are remote, you are limited in your services. So sporting events, we're all taking, as parents, you're all taking turns and you're taking the whole team up to one place to come back from another place. It's just all part of what would you do here in this situation to be here. My kids loved it. They loved the fact that it was a small school and they got to have, really good, limited classes with teachers. A lot of their field trips would be with a park biologist or Scientologist coming into the park and learning about wolves or bears or geology or something else. So the field trips are really cool for the kids when they were doing that stuff because they're getting real, hands-on science experiences. But as they got older, of course, and there's I want to live in a city. I want to live in these places. I want to have all these opportunities available to me. Both of them are in college now. They're both over in Oregon. One of them is loving it, is staying there, and they're like, yeah, this is what I want to do. But another one is after their first year in college, they're like, I miss Wyoming. I miss the remoteness. I want to come back. So
that is
I think
so cool.
I think a seed got planted with that. So for sure.
That is great. Well, I love that they had that experience growing up because it's such a unique way to be raised
Right.
and a unique environment in which to be raised that just it doesn't happen anymore. There's no
Right.
place in the United States that you can have that kind of upbringing.
No, and one more thing, at both of their orientations, when you're kind of introducing yourself to your fellow students, and both of them said, when I said I'm from Wyoming and I live in Yellowstone, the entire classroom was in awe of them. It's you got to grow up and live in this place. That's incredible, kind of a deal. So
they would be rock stars. I'm
yeah.
sure they would be rock stars. That is so awesome. Mike, we're getting close to the end of our time here today, but I want to ask you, what is your favorite time of year? Is it this time where everything is so busy, or is it the winter? Is it the winter when everything is quiet and covered in snow and you have the place to yourself? What's your thoughts?
I love the park year round, but there are a couple of times here. This time of year right now is actually awesome. Watching the park wake up. We have baby animals all over the place right now. The elk are calving in Mammoth. The bison just had their calves. So we have bears out with cubs. It is always great to watch this park wake up in the spring. Everything is green. It's just lovely right now. But personally, my favorite time of the year is the last couple of weeks of September, the first couple of weeks of October in the fall. By then, the elk are bugling. You're getting into the rutting season with that. The trees have turned. There's just a little bit of Christmas in the air. I love hiking in the backcountry that time of year. That's probably my favorite, kind of that 4-week window there. So
that's wonderful. One last question for people who are planning their trips to Yellowstone, who haven't gone yet this year because the park's just waking up. What's your best advice for us who haven't been to the park yet? What should we be looking for this year? What's standing out this year? What's new and fun? I mean, I know you can't go to Biscuit Basin, so
right, exactly. But that's new and fun. And from a geology standpoint, I think that's really
right.
Cool.
Yes.
So, this park is very big, and you hear the narrative about it's overcrowded, it's overrun, there's too many visitors. There is so much to this park that, everybody goes to one place. They want to see Grand Prismatic Spring. Okay, so you bring this large crowd into there. But in the meantime, Hayden Valley, Lamar Valley, Lewis River Falls, there's all kinds of places in this park you can go to that don't necessarily have the same amount of crowds. So again, do your homework. Look at the park, kind of understand the layout of Yellowstone. And when you plan to go around the park, it's no different than going to an amusement park. Don't be crisscrossing the park all the time. Go to one place and explore that entire area. There are so many hikes and opportunities in Yellowstone where you go a quarter mile to a half mile into the backcountry and there's no crowds. You are out there in the wilderness. And it takes just 10 minutes to get there, kind of a deal. So, and waterfalls to see, animals to see, geothermal features to see. There's opportunities throughout this park to go see and explore. So stick to the roads if you want to just do the basic things. But if you really want to understand and see Yellowstone, get out there in the backcountry and explore your park.
Speaking as somebody who has lived there and worked there for so many years, what about I keep saying one last question. What about, speaking specifically for Xanterra, How are the bookings this year? I mean, do you guys have openings? Because I just know for years it's like you had to book the year before in order to
Right.
reserve a room.
Right.
Are there openings this year? Can we get a last minute reservation?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's one of these the urban myths, kind of a thing. The last 2 weeks of August and that first week of September, we kind of go through this phase where the summer family vacation ends, and people are going back to they're getting back to take their kids to school or whatever else. But before that fall visitation really kind of kicks off, that is a great time of year to come to Yellowstone. We typically have availability at several locations. Right now, this time of year, we're still kind of opening up. We have some opportunities, and we're about 2 to 3 weeks away from getting out of that space. But in campgrounds, there's almost always some kind of availability in a campground if you're looking for something. So people think, oh, I can't go. That is actually not correct. We do have opportunities here. Mid-July, early August, that's the toughest. Historically, about the 1st to the 10th of August is the busiest, the highest level of visitation in Yellowstone. So that's kind of the peak of the season. But even as you get into the fall, end of September, early October, there's opportunities. Mammoth Hotel now, we keep it open all the way through until March, so it doesn't close in the fall anymore. So if you want to come in October, November, it's a great getaway as well. So
That's perfect. You've answered all the questions that have popped up in my brain in the last 5 minutes. So thank you very much. Mike, this has been such a grand conversation, and I'm excited to get to the park. We're hoping to go next weekend. So I'm
awesome.
very excited about that. Thank you for your years of service. I know how much stress your staff has to be under with all the visitations. So we are grateful for all that you do to make our experiences in Yellowstone very memorable. So please, on behalf of all of us who love Yellowstone, thanks to you and your staff for all the work that you're doing. And I love how much you love your job. That's just so great. We're glad that you were able to carve out some time for us for today.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much, Wendy.
You bet. And folks, thank you for tuning in today. I hope that today's conversation has inspired you to take a trip to Yellowstone this summer because it's the place to go. It's the place to go. And I'm so excited about getting in there and doing some exploring myself. Thanks for tuning into today's Roundup. Stay tuned next week. We've got more great guests coming up. We've got a lot of guests in our archives. So if you have missed any episode of the Roundup, go back and maybe click on one of those. It's like, I don't know who that person is, but if they're on the Roundup, they must have a story to tell. And that's the truth. So check us out. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks, Mike. Folks, have a wonderful week.